Thursday night in the NFL draft sure did bring some shockers. Justin Pooni, Jordan Horrobin of NorthStar Bets joining us today. Jordan, let's get right into it. A whole lot of stuff to get into, a whole lot of things to unpackage, some shocking picks, especially made by the Atlanta Falcons. But let's get to the obvious. Caleb Williams was the number one pick. Kind of a 5-month wait was finally announced that he was going to be the first overall pick for the Chicago Bears. Right now on NorthStar Bets, they are minus 104 to make the playoffs. So, Jordan, when you look at the Bears roster with the addition of Caleb Williams, they draft Rome Odunze with the 9th overall pick as well from Washington wide receiver to go with Keenan Allen, Cole Kmet, DJ Moore, DeAndre Swift, and that defense that did improve in the second half of the season. Do you think the Bears can be a playoff team this upcoming season?
They absolutely can be a playoff team. I mean, I don't want to put a definitive yes on that just yet. I mean, you look within the division, the Lions are going to be awesome again. The Packers showed a lot of promise with the young receivers. Obviously, Jordan Love looks very comfortable now. So even within their division, they're going to have at least 4 pretty tough games in that schedule, which is to say nothing about the Minnesota Vikings. We'll see what happens with them there. But they're definitely in that bucket of teams that should be competing for a wild card spot. It's funny to think, we're talking about a team that picked first overall. Can they make the playoffs? But obviously that wasn't their draft pick originally. That was the Panthers pick. So the expectations for the Bears coming off a 7-10 season, you get your guy, the consensus first overall selection in Caleb Williams. You get him a guy, another weapon that he really wanted, Rome Odunze. They flew into Detroit together. They seem like they're already good buddies. And then obviously Keenan Allen, adding him to the mix. DJ Moore was awesome in his first year as a Bear. So a lot to look at there. And then adding Montez Sweat on defense last year, a little bit of an underrated move, given that the Bears weren't in a competitive window just yet. But like you said, the defense made big strides. So all of that is to say the Chicago Bears should be competing for a playoff spot. I don't think they're going to win the division or anything like that, but it's time for them to go.
I do. I agree with everything you said. And also, they have Jalen Johnson, a great cornerback who just got paid as well this offseason. Everything we've heard about Caleb Williams is he's basically a mixture of Patrick Mahomes and your favorite pocket quarterback, right? He had a bit of an off year this year at USC, but if you watch those games at USC, he wasn't playing with a whole lot. And I think the Bears have done a great job building an offense and insulating Caleb Williams to have weapons around because we see it across the NFL all over the place. Look at Justin Fields, who was just in Chicago. He didn't really have as very many options and weapons until last year with DJ Moore. Now the Bears have an offense with guys that are vets, that are reliable, and then also that Caleb Williams doesn't have the pressure to put the Superman cape on every single game and put the team on his shoulder. He has elite playmakers, guys that have been there, guys that have done that. And I think the pressure's now on the coach, Matt Eberflus, who has all these pieces around him, and can he put it together? That, to me, is the biggest question. As for a playoff team, I'm going to say no because they just miss out because that division that they're in is loaded as well. You talked about the Lions. The Packers are everybody's favorite team right now. I think the Vikings with Kevin O'Connell, Justin Jefferson, and their new rookie quarterback, J.J. McCarthy or Sam Darnold are going to be not an easy slouch. So I'm going to say they finish like 8-9 or in the playoff hunt for the last couple of weeks and just miss out. But I do think Caleb Williams, who is the favorite to win Rookie of the Year, according to NorthStar Bets, will be sensational. I don't know if he's going to live up to the generational hype in year one, but he's definitely going to have a great year.
Yeah, no, it's hard to live up to generational hype in 1 year. So I'm not going to put that on him either. But I know if you watched any of his USC film from last year, he's running around like a madman a lot of the time. And I think they just didn't have an O-line that could really hold up for him. So we'll see what happens with the Bears here if they're able to give him a little more time. He's someone who, if you compare him to a Jaden Daniels, for example, Williams is much more willing to make that pass as opposed to extending the play with his legs. Not that he can't do that, but he doesn't want to take that big hit. He'd rather make the big throw.
Yeah, and that's the last thing with Caleb Williams was, and I really learning about this during the draft process, was at his pro day, he only threw from inside the pocket to show everybody that, hey, I can be a pocket quarterback. But you mentioned Jaden Daniels. He went second overall. Drake Maye went third overall to New England. Then, of course, Michael Penix went eighth. We're going to touch on that in a second. But also you had Bo Nix to Denver and then J.J. McCarthy to Minnesota. So we saw 6 quarterbacks taken in the first 12 picks. Out of those out of those five minus Caleb Williams, who do you think is going to have the biggest impact on their team?
I mean, the answer has to be Jaden Daniels. And part of that is because I think he's the only one that feels like a lock to start from day one. I think Penix, yeah, because Penix is going to be the backup for the Falcons again. There's more to talk about there. Penix will be the backup for the Falcons. You've got McCarthy, who he only turned 21 in January, so it wouldn't surprise me at all if he is the backup to start with Minnesota. Drake Maye, he could start right away. There's Jacoby Brissett there, I believe, in New England, so that one's a bit of a toss-up. Bo Nix, I don't know. Who knows what Sean Payton's thinking? I mean, maybe Zach Wilson will start game one. I have no idea. For me, it's Jaden Daniels is the one that's going to have the biggest impact. And part of that is simply him going second overall. He should be the starter right away. And he's a guy who's old enough to have beaten Justin Herbert in college. So, he's someone who should be ready. He should be seasoned. And we'll see what he can do. He's obviously very exciting, and the dual threat component is a big part of his value. But him being a little undersized, a little maybe too willing to hold onto the ball and make things happen with his feet, I'm very curious to see if that's going to hold up in the NFL, if the Commanders are going to try to get him to stay in the pocket a little more. But a lot to watch with him for sure.
Yeah, Jaden Daniels has that wow factor to him, that explosive running ability. I mean, he won the Heisman Trophy last year at LSU. I do think that Jaden Daniels has the potential to have the biggest pop. I think Caleb Williams will be stable throughout the whole year, but Jaden Daniels will make those wow plays, kind of like RG3. And a lot of comparisons have been made to RG3 during this whole draft process with Jaden Daniels. That remember when Andrew Luck came in, he was kind of the stable, steady, when playing every game, you kind of knew what you're going to get. But with RG3, he made those explosive plays, those bang plays right away. And I think you're going to get that a lot with Jaden Daniels. I do think he will have the greatest impact because, like you mentioned, McCarthy, I don't know, he might maybe later on in the year, fans are going to be wanting him to see him play in Minnesota. I think Bo Nix, again, he's a guy who's played over 60 starts in college football as well. So he's a guy that could start right away. I just don't really like a lot of Denver's weapons. The guy I feel the worst for is Drake Maye. I think Drake Maye is an extremely talented quarterback, but who's he going to be throwing the ball to? Right? The Patriots don't really have any offensive weapons. They have a defensive-minded coach. So Drake Maye is going to be, and I hate to say this about a guy who's just starting his NFL career, he's on that trajectory of a Zach Wilson in New York or a Justin Fields in Chicago, where he's expected to do a whole lot of stuff with a whole lot of nothing. And I'm very worried that the same will be the case for Drake Maye.
Yeah, no, I think that's reasonable to say just from the jump, given that they don't have any exciting offensive weapons there. Like you said, it's a new coach, defensive-minded coach, and it's a division that is not getting any easier. So it's going to be tricky for him. I hope he doesn't have to go the Zach Wilson route here. Yeah. But he's also coming into this league with a little bit more hope in terms of his own individual profile than Zach Wilson. So I think when Wilson went second overall to the Jets, that was much more of a surprise. A lot of people like Maye over Daniels as a prospect. So we'll see if he can kind of overperform the kind of position he's in.
And the other thing, Drake Maye, he's a bigger body than a Zach Wilson. He can handle the physicality of the NFL a little bit more. And he's the youngest of four brothers. I don't know if you saw that video that his brothers made of him. Like the competition and in fact of that's a good trait to have, especially with a quarterback and a guy who's expected to kind of help the Patriots back up from the post-Tom Brady era. But let's get to the biggest shocker of the night. Michael Penix Jr., quarterback of Washington, getting drafted in the top 10, which was a surprise itself. A lot of people in mock drafts had him in the mid-first round, mid to end of the first round. But the team, the Atlanta Falcons, Jordan, who just signed Kirk Cousins to a brand new $180 million deal for 4 years, and they draft Michael Penix Jr. Now, there's a lot of division in this argument here where people are like, oh, it's a good insurance policy to have. And then people are like, this is crazy. You just signed Cousins to this massive money deal. Where do you stand on this? Are you okay with it, or were you just as shocked as everybody else?
I was floored. I was watching the draft and I thought Dallas Turner was going to be the pick for the Falcons at 8. You spent a top 10 pick on an offensive weapon each of the past 3 years. Seemed like it was a good time to go ahead and take somebody on defense. Dallas Turner, to me, seemed like the best guy on the board there. He fell a little bit, obviously, after that pick. But when they announced that it was Michael Penix, I just couldn't believe it. It doesn't make any sense to me. I mean, it would have made a lot more sense, I think, if you wanted to go with an offensive guy, just grab another receiver. I don't know why you would go for the quarterback who's going to be 24 in May,
Yeah.
who has had 4 season-ending injuries in his collegiate career, 2 of which were knee injuries. And yes, he was an absolute dog for Washington. He balled out this year. It was super fun to watch him running a really, really high octane offense, excuse me.
Mhm.
But I just don't, it doesn't make sense. Like you said, Kirk Cousins, he comes into Atlanta and this is the welcome he gets. They call him
Yeah.
when they're on the clock with the pick. Maybe run it by the guy a little bit before that. I mean, you mentioned the $180 million. $100 million of that is guaranteed.
Mhm.
So even if you're in it with Kirk for at least 2 years. So let's say after 2 years you decide you want to move on from him. You've got a decent dead cap hit, and then you bring in this quarterback who's new to the NFL, but also already 26 years old,
Yeah.
and you've used a top 10 pick on him. So none of that makes any sense to me. I think if you're Kirk Cousins, you absolutely should feel blindsided. You should feel disappointed, which is the kind of communication coming out of his camp. Not a good way to start his tenure in Atlanta.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of comparisons to what happened with Green Bay with when they brought in Aaron Rodgers to replace Brett Favre, but when they just brought in Jordan Love to bring it to replace Aaron Rodgers. But those were at the end of the first round,
That's
right?
yeah,
This
it's
was
not the same thing.
a top 10 pick. They just paid Kirk Cousins too, like what a month ago when free agency opened up. So to me, I understand you need a quarterback of the future. Kirk's coming off, a torn Achilles himself, so we don't know how healthy he's going to be, but to start this off with your new franchise quarterback, and you and I both know that relationship management is such a big thing in the NFL. To have your quarterback who, you think is going to be there for 4 years plus, wants to finish his career, retire as a Falcon, and we know quarterbacks now play into their 40s, especially ones like Kirk Cousins who aren't extremely athletic. To draft it in the first 10 picks is mind-boggling. I want if Atlanta, for example, traded down and then took him at the end of the first round or kind of in the 20 range, that would be a bit more stomachable. But to draft him, like you mentioned, ahead of some defensive players who, like, they need all the sack help they can get. That defense cannot get to the quarterback at all. And we know that's such a big factor in winning football games. It was head scratching to me. It was definitely crazy. And look, I agree. Penix's injury history is a question. He was completely healthy last year with Washington. He had a great season until he hit the Michigan Wolverines. But oof, I don't know what Atlanta's doing, and it's going to be interesting to see now how Kirk Cousins reacts to this. Do you think that there's going to be some pushback from him when the season starts, when they report to training camp?
Well, I mean, the guy's got 100 million guaranteed
Yeah.
coming to his bank account, so I wouldn't push back too hard if I was him. But we'll see how he handles it in the media. I mean, the way he'll probably do it as a well-trained professional athlete at this point is to say that he embraces competition. And yes, he was surprised by the pick, but he understands the faith that the organization has in him
Mhm.
to be the guy and to mentor Penix. He'll probably hit us with all of those talking points, and that's totally fine. I think no matter what, though, the Falcons have egg on their face for this one because if you wanted Penix to be the replacement for Desmond Ritter because that was boring and terrible last year, that's totally fine. But then you shouldn't have given Kirk Cousins so many millions of dollars,
Mhm.
right? And the fact that you did invest in Kirk Cousins, he seems like your guy. You seem like the front runners to win the NFC South. Why on earth would you then turn around and spend a top 10 pick on a quarterback that most people didn't have anywhere near that range, certainly on their board?
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And we're looking at the NFC South. The Falcons, of course, still are the favorites to win that, according to NorthStar bets. But let's look at the Super Bowl futures. Round one is in the books. Currently on NorthStar bets, the San Francisco 49ers are the favorites. Right behind them is the Kansas City Chiefs and then the Baltimore Ravens. Jordan, I know the season doesn't kick off to the first week of September, and we're still in April. But at this particular juncture, who do you have as a Super Bowl favorite or a dark horse potentially to win the Super Bowl next February?
It's great that we could talk about the NFL all year, though, right? I mean,
Absolutely,
it's a
absolutely.
never-ending news
Yes.
cycle this league. It's
Yeah.
remarkable. I mean, you got to love the Kansas City Chiefs, right? Like, how can you not? They have Patrick Mahomes. That in and of itself is a trump card. They just won last
Mhm.
year. They give him another weapon in the draft, and they added Hollywood Brown in the offseason too. So, we'll have to see what happens with Rasheed Rice, his legal situation.
Mhm.
Uncertain if that's going to cause him to miss time or not. But regardless, their receiving core is going to look a lot better, a lot faster than last year, and that's really bad news for everybody else in the league. So from a top heavy front runner type standpoint, that's a
Mhm.
team I really like. Someone in a little bit more of a mid tier would be the Texans, and obviously they didn't even have a draft pick uh, on day one this year, and that's because they got their guy last year. They did it right, getting C.J.
Mhm.
Stroud at the top of last year's draft. So I'm not really looking at. I'm not worried about the fact they didn't have a pick in the first round this year. I mean, they have 2 seconds and 2/4 in this draft, so they can still do some fun stuff. But the
Yeah.
Texans are a team that had the rookie of the year on both sides of the ball. They won a playoff game. They added Stephon Diggs. I mean,
Mhm.
what is there to not like about this team? They're in a very winnable division. So the Texans are a team I'm really bullish on.
Look, I know I can't you can't argue with the Kansas City Chiefs at all. I think I like the Bengals this year. Now I know T. Higgins and Trey Hendricks are
Okay,
both requesting trades, but we know in the
doesn't
NFL
matter. Yeah,
that's just a ploy to get some more money. I mean, AJ Brown scrubbed his whole Instagram and had Tom Brady as his display picture on Instagram, and then yesterday we find out he signs for 94 million bucks. So we know that the NFL is big in negotiating tactics like that. I like the Bengals. I think if Joe Burrow can stay healthy, they've proven they can go to Arrowhead and beat the Kansas City Chiefs before. I think the Bengals as my top heavy favorite team. And then as a little bit of a mid card team, this pains me to say because I'm a Seattle Seahawks fan, but a team like the LA Rams at plus 2,800. Matt Stafford is healthy. They made the playoffs last year. They have a whole bunch of young assets now. I think the Rams could get one more kick at the can with Stafford and really make a charge for a Super Bowl here, and try to get one more ring out of this Stafford era.
yeah, you went a little more bold than I did with 28 to
Yeah,
one there. Good for you. I respect that. They just got Stafford some help on the line, I think, or
they
no, they
did.
they
They
took an
did.
edge rusher or
They
something.
took an edge rusher. Yeah. Well, they're going to
Yeah,
be missing
verse
Aaron
verse.
Donald, but
Right,
they had
that's a big
a good
one.
draft last year as well. So look, like you mentioned, the NFL and the news cycle is absolutely always churning, and I'm sure down the road we'll have another conversation about some NFL stuff soon. Thank you, Jordan. Again, we really appreciate it.
Thanks a lot, Justin. Fun to chat.